Beattitudes. You know what the Beattitudes are, okay? All right. Well, you're going to hear about it today. Matthew chapter 5. In fact, when you turn there, your Bible probably has just above chapter 5, does it say the Beatitudes? All right? So just a little background. Jesus is very, very early into his ministry, and he's gathered some of his disciples, and now he's got the tremendous task of reshaping not only their minds, because he knew what he was going to teach them, that's verbally, but he realized also he would be having to cut through their previous instruction and training from the rabbis. He realized this. And he also realized that what he was going to teach them would, in many respects, conflict with what they had already learned. And there was two levels. There was the verbal instruction, but then there's also the matter of the heart, in other words, the motives. And so from the rabbis, they got a lot of the verbal instruction. Okay? They got the do's and the don'ts and all this. But where the rabbis failed was the heart and the motive. And so Jesus not only had the task of teaching his disciples to unlearn some things that they had learned from the rabbis, but also to teach the rabbis where they got the information. So, and he's doing this by himself. Okay, one man. And so he's got a great, great job ahead of him. And so he's rounded up his disciples, and one of the first things he needs to do is to drop back, group them, isolate them, and begin to lay out his plan. Okay? And when I say plan, I mean they had to know from the very beginning that he was not just another rabbi, even though they called him rabbi. He was not just another rabbi, you know, that they could go and get advice from and this and that. He had to begin to show them he was way, way, way different, right? So he separates them out. And so we're going to learn some of the things that he was going to deal with as he basically laid out his the whole campaign. Because remember now, he's going to take them aside, teach them, and then he's going to re-enter the arena, as it were, okay? And throw them in the mix. And he's going to confront these people in front of his disciples. And he wants them to be prepped as to some of the things he's going to teach, some of the things he's going to say, because he knows he's going to be met with resistance. So he's got to prep them for this, okay? And it's kind of like boot camp. Before you throw them out into the war, you got to take and gather them, put them aside, put them in boot camp, and start to train them to throw them back into the mix and to be prepared for the conflict. And so this is what he's doing. So in chapter 5 we read, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets, which were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I came not to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth shall pass, one jot or one tittle shall no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. So then he goes on in the next few passages, and one of the laws or principles of teaching is to start with the known. In other words, you want to connect. So you have to start with what you know they know. What you know that they've been taught. And so it's just like in school, Noah. Every year, I'm guessing, I'm going out on a limb here. Okay, every year, your math gets a little harder. In other words, you're not doing 1 plus 1 anymore. Okay. So, and then every year, they start you out kind of reviewing. And then they move you into connecting with what you already had learned. Then they move you into uncharted territory, right? Now you don't know this algebra stuff, okay? But before algebra is pre-algebra. And before pre-algebra is, well, what's before pre-algebra? I forgot already.
Fundamentals. 6th grade.
Huh?
Fundamentals. Fundamentals,
basic math, okay? Alrighty, 1 plus 1. And as far as I know, it's been a while since I've been in school, but Lydia, is 1 plus 1 still 2, or have they changed that? It's still 2. Okay, good. I was wondering. You know, sometimes they change things on you, you know. But anyway, so you start with what you know, what they know you know, and then you slowly move into another area. And so basically, advance you a little bit. So next year, what they taught you this year, they're going to start with that and then go on to the next level. Okay? All right. So this is what Jesus is doing. In the next few verses, he says, "You have heard that it has been said. You've been taught this by your rabbis." Okay? And, you know, rightfully so. But I'm going to come along and I'm going to give you the spirit of it. I'm going to teach you a layer or a level that's the intangible. You mentioned the intangibles, okay? You know, I was thinking about that. Think of a sports team. Let's just think of a football team, for instance. On that football team, you've got everybody who has their role of their assignment, their position, they call it. Okay? You're the center. Your job is to snap the ball. You're the quarterback. Your job is to get the ball. You're the receiver. Your job is to run out there and I throw you the ball. Your job is the running back, and if I'm not going to throw it, I'm going to hand it off to you. Your job is to protect me so I can do that. Okay? The guards and tackles. Okay? Everyone's got a job. Defense, same thing. Okay? So those are the, you know, no pun intended, but those are the X's and O's of a football team, okay? All right. But the intangibles, the invisible part, the part you can't see, but it's vital, is team chemistry. Where's that? You can't see it, you know, you can't hold it in your hand, team chemistry. But it's got to be there in order for everyone to want to execute their assignment, run that play, make that block just a little more forcefully. In other words, you learn the fundamentals, but your mind has to, I want to do this, okay? And then you have to, your morale, okay? These are the intangibles that actually take the team and all their individual positions, group them together, mold them together into a unit, a team. That's the intangibles, okay? Team chemistry, morale, want to, and then mental toughness. That's something that has to be individual too. Sure, you are the center, or you're the quarterback, or you're the defensive lineman, you're the corner, but you've got to have this mental toughness. That part, a coach can teach you how to tackle, how to, maybe some tips and techniques on how to intercept, but you've got to have the mental toughness. That's another X factor. Okay? So these are all things that go into making then a team that is successful. And that's why you see some of these teams who've been together for years and years and years enjoy success, because they know each other. You know, I know I know what routes you like to run. I know what side you like to catch the ball, this way or this way. I know whether you like it up here or down here. You know, we talk. We play together in the same team, so we know these little things about each other. Okay, that's the chemistry, and then the mental toughness. Okay, all part of the game. All part of the game. We don't give up. And so he's realizing that he's going to have some confrontation. And so he said, I know that you have been taught these things, but there's another layer, another level of instruction that they did not pass on to you because they don't know it themselves. Okay? And so he goes on to describe some of these things and some of the things the Pharisees left out. So what he's doing here in chapters 5, 6, and 7 is beginning to prep them for this major campaign that he's going to launch and go public with his ministry. And so one of the first things he needs to do, though, is separate himself and his style, as it were, and the things he's going to say, and get them to begin to be on the same page as himself. Okay? So let's go back to the first chapter, the first verses. He sees the multitudes, and he's going to separate himself from the multitude. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were all by themselves up there. It's just that he saw the multitudes, and before he launched himself into this, he needed to gear up his own disciples. So he took his disciples aside and sat down and began to teach them. Now, if others are listening to it, that's fine. But his instruction is primarily to them. Okay? And he opened his mouth and taught them. Okay? His target are his own disciples. Okay? And so he goes on to describe, he just lays out these blessings, okay, that are important, that they would have to remember these things. So as they would, in other words, he's trying to shape their spirit, okay, their emotions. Blessed are the poor in spirit, downtrodden, the depressed. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, because they have something to look forward to. Yes, they're poor in spirit. They may be poor in money. Okay, their life's conditions is just not what they maybe had mapped out for themselves. But he says, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They got something that they have waiting for them. Blessed are they that mourn. He said, they're going to be comforted. So he's saying that, look, you look around you, and you see your neighbors and people you grew up with, he said their conditions are less than ideal. But as far as how God looks at it, he's got something in store for them, much, much better. Okay? Now keep in mind that who's standing before them? It's the one that they've been waiting for. It's the Messiah. It's the one. Little did they, I think, maybe realize at this point, at least not fully, because he had the whole 3 years out in front of him. This is the very, very early setting here. Little did they realize just the power that the one that he had. Okay, they would see things down the road. They'd see him calm the winds and the seas. They would see him do all these miracles, but they hadn't seen all this yet. But he's got to chart the course. He's got to say, look, you're in for a ride here. It's going to be different. Some of it's the same, but it's going to be different. So we're going to have some confrontation. You've heard it said. You've heard them say this, but I say unto you. Okay. So he's basically going to look. This is how it is. Are you in or are you out? Are you with me or not? Okay. Basically, this was their moment to say, well, you know what? This sounds a little strange. This is a little off. You know, this doesn't jive with what I've already learned. So tell you what, we'll see you guys. You know, adios. Okay. They had their window, their moment, but they all stayed. They all stayed, and they listened to what he had to say. So he's saying, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Now, every good Jew understood that principle. Okay, they understood that. Keep your place here. Let's take a little trip over to Psalm 37. Psalm 37. At verse, I think it showed up like 3 places, but let's say verse 9 and verse 22 to start with. Psalm 37. Oh, I've got a little deacon boy up here. Okay, Psalm 37. And verse 9. Well, let's see, he's talking about, let's look at verse 7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently. This is a good one. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil, for evildoers shall be cut off. But those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. And so, what Jesus is telling his disciples isn't something brand new out of the box. This is something that they grew up expecting. This was something that was mentioned repeatedly in the Old Testament. Verse 22, for such as be blessed of him shall inherit the earth, and they that be cursed of him shall be cut off. It seems like there's one more verse that talks about this. Verse 29. The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell therein forever. And so in this one song, we got 3 mentions of an inheritance of the earth. Amazing. Okay? Not anything new at all. Okay? Let's go to Proverbs 3:35. Incidentally, with Proverbs, because there's 31 Proverbs, they're a good daily reading. That's 3:35. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. And so it seems like wherever they mention the wise getting the inheritance, they also throw in there, but the wicked or the foolish aren't going to. So, in other words, just kind of a little reminder there that, you snooze, you lose, and you're not going to get it. So he's telling them, he's starting with the known. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Okay? Yeah, blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. And so he's just reiterating some things that they knew as Hebrews, as Jews, raised up under the law, to kind of connect with them on that note. And then he's going to, of course, take it further on into his ministry. And then keep this in mind, too, that when he was about ready to go to the cross, at the very tail end of this ministry we see now starting out, near the end of it, he said, there's a lot of stuff I'd like to teach you. There's a lot more I'd like to teach you. But your minds couldn't handle it. Your minds, you wouldn't be able to remember it or handle all of it. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go away, and then I'm going to come back in spirit, and I'll teach you in your minds, okay? That way he can be in a lot of different places while you're at work, okay? Or while you're at school, okay? Wherever we might be. He can minister to all of us and speak to all of us, our hearts, at the same time if he wants to, okay? And instruct you and instruct me into areas we need. So they got it all together like a classroom, one teacher, one lesson for that moment, and they all hear it. Okay? And so when he deals with the mind, then it's more custom. It's customized. What do I need today? What do you need today? What will you need tomorrow? What will you need for your situation? It might take days, weeks, or months. And so it's customized for you. That's the advantage of doing it through the Spirit, entering into our minds. Okay? I will write the laws on their hearts, and I'll put them into their minds. Okay? And so all they had here basically was verbal instruction from a rabbi or written instruction from the Torah. But this is going to go to a deeper level and a more effective level. Okay? So we come here to learn. We come here to drink in the Word, and then we depart to apply the Word. Okay? So he's saying here that there's a certain blessing for those who are hungering and thirsting after this Word, after the right way to do things, the righteousness with God. Okay? For they shall be filled. So that means this, that if we're hungry and thirsting after this, if it's just above average level of desire, then God is not going to disappoint us. He'll make sure that that desire is satisfied, okay, is filled. And then he says, as he continues to shape their hearts, the rabbis had a tendency to be very, very harsh. We use the word legalistic, okay? And we will see this later on in his ministry, where they found a man and woman committing adultery. They grabbed the woman and parade her in front of everybody, but there's no mention of the man. You wonder, what happened to the man? I kind of wonder if he was a fellow Pharisee, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway. But you wonder, where's the man? Well, there's the woman, and they're ready to stone her. He said, okay, all right, I get it, that's the law, all right. So, first one without sin, pick up the first stone and throw it at her. What happened? One by one, they slowly, with rock in hand, I can just picture this, with all this anger, just, we've got her now, just drop the rock and just walk on home, okay? And then she was left there, and so he showed compassion to her, and showed her, neither do I condemn you, but go and sin no more, okay? So they were ready to stone her, okay? So what is he saying here? This is the kind of people that we're going to go out and deal with here. So he says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Okay? Reminds me too, later on in his ministry, he would speak of two people in a parable. And he said, one guy owed $100, I'm just going to use these numbers. One guy owed $100 to this other guy. And he said, look, I don't have the $100, I'd like to pay, but I can't. And so the guy says, well, I need the money. He says, well, I can't pay. So he begged for it. Please let me just slide on this one. And he says, how'd it go, Andrew? He said he forgave him. Did he say yes on that? Well, anyway. Then he was forgiven of the $100. So he goes, okay, thank you for letting me slide. I don't owe you the 100, right? Okay, right. So then he goes to a guy that owed him money. Owed him $50, much less. So he says, where's the $50? And now the guy is pleading for his debt. And he says, please, I got a wife and kids and all that kind of stuff. Please let me go on this. He says, no, I'm not letting you go on this. Okay, no mercy, right? So the guy couldn't pay, so he had him thrown in jail. And so then the Lord visited that guy and said, wait a minute, his debtor, he says, look, I forgave you $100. And you couldn't forgive that guy 50? Okay? Tell you what, I'm changing my mind. You're going into jail until you pay me. And so in other words, he exercised no mercy, and so that no mercy was shown to him. So he's trying to shape their hearts as well as their minds. So he's not only going to start with the known of what you know from the Torah and the scriptures, but he says there's another part of you that also needs to catch up to this that the Pharisees were lacking, and that's your heart. So you see what he's doing here? He's trying to, as he launches them out into the bad world of the Pharisees and Sadducees, he's trying to prep them so that they can see the difference. So as they interact with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, that they see their reaction to Jesus and his love and his mercy and his forgiveness. They see them just stone cold hearted. Instead of warming up to him, they're keeping their distance and they're challenging him and his teachings and all of this. And so he's showing this to the disciples. Look, this is what I want you to be like. You're not going to see it in your other elders, okay? Just watch. And so I'm sure that they began to watch and observe. They see Jesus, and they see their former teachers. They go, just like you said. I'm now seeing their hearts. I get it. I see what you're trying to say, okay? And so it was important that they separate themselves from that mentality because it was a low-life mentality, okay? And so as he wraps this up, he said in verse 20, let's go back to that. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. And so, this inheriting the earth, okay? And of course, what's understood here but not spelled out is the inheriting the earth with the rulership position. That's because they understood that as Jews also. As Jews, they understood that Israel would be the top nation and that they would rule the other nations. Kind of like in Solomon's time, okay? Or David's time. And so, they understood that. So when they talk about the kingdom, in their minds, it's the rulership in the kingdom. So he says, unless you are cut above your rabbis who've missed major points on what God would have them to know, he says, you're not going to be in that situation. Just pure and simple. Okay? And so another thing that I want to point out is he demonstrates that in the kingdom there's going to be the greater and the lesser. Not everyone is going to be the same, and so that's what he's talking about in verse 18. Verse 19. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men to do that, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them these commandments, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So we've got two parties here ending up in the kingdom of heaven, one greater, one lesser. And so it all depends on their response and their receptiveness to the Word of God, their hearts toward it, and how they and then how they dealt with other people with it. Okay, so all this is part of their instruction. All this is part of their teaching. And then in verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, the sincere, for they shall see God. Again, as we go out into the public, take this ministry public, we're going to meet up with some people who are not sincere. They're not genuine. Oh, they'll have the clothing that makes them look holy and righteous. And they'll stand there and they'll pretend to do long prayers, and they'll put their offerings into the cup, as it were, for poor people, whatever, alms. But it's all for show. It's just all for show. So, but you, in order for you to have this better righteousness than the Pharisees, then you've got to do this with sincerity. Sincerity of heart. Now, how many times does this principle alone show up in the New Testament? Oh, over and over and over. And I think it's there to remind us that, we can put on a good show, but God sees right into our hearts. He sees right into the hearts. And so these instructions on the heart and sincerity, love without hypocrisy, all that stuff, is there to remind us, I'm watching. Okay? And so he's trying to get them on board with understanding that it's all about the heart. Okay? So it says, blessed are the pure. And does the New King James say pure or sincere? Does it say pure? Verse 8? Pure, okay. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. They'll be rewarded. Where's God going to be? In the form of His Son in the city. Okay? He's the light of the city. And then when you're, Andrew, in your lesson, turn over to Revelation 1, 26 to 27. One of the blessings that they'll receive the morning star. Well, Jesus is the morning star. So when you receive the morning star, the day star, you're getting Jesus. You're getting Jesus. You're getting the fellowship. And that what Luke 22, 28 through 30 says, I think it is. Let's just go there real quick. Keep your place in Matthew. 22, 28 through 30. Yes. You are they which have continued with me in my trials and my temptations. And here again, now it's getting close to his betrayal and all of this. So he says, look, all these 3 years, you've stayed with me in all my trials, the testings, the controversy and the confrontations with the Pharisees and the Sadducees that I told you was coming there in Matthew chapter 5, up on the mountain. You've seen it all. He says, and because you stayed with me, He says, I appoint unto you a kingdom as my Father hath appointed unto me, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So it's that relationship with Christ that they were beginning to have, that they would continue to have forever. That's amazing, amazing. So, but some conditions have to be there in order for that blessing to be realized. The pure in heart, they shall see God. The peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Okay? Peacemakers, of course, would be not with us and God, but with us and us. People. So our interaction with people. And if necessary, trying to bring people together under the same rule and spirit of the Scriptures. Try to heal hearts that are at odds. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted. Now he's getting to move into another area that he knew was coming. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, namely himself, namely his disciples. Okay? For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So he keeps going back to this promise, the Abrahamic promise. He wants to remind them of this. This thing has to be out in the front, not behind us. If it's behind us, it's forgotten. And all we have in front of us is the worries and cares of life. If this is in front of us, then we have the worries and cares of life with the kingdom in front of us. Big difference. And that's what he's trying to get them to see. Get ready. You're going to be persecuted. Get ready. They're going to strike the shepherd. Okay? And so, clearly, this is an upgraded, perfect sermon that they needed to hear as he launched the campaign. And so, for righteousness' sake, to stay on board with righteousness, for righteousness' sake, to stay right with God. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake, okay, on account of me. Okay? Because your association with me, they're going to go after you. So he says, blessed are you when they do that. That's just amazing. That is amazing. Okay? 1 Peter 2:23. What does the word revile mean? When they shall revile you. They go on the attack. They attack you with all vengeance. It's hatred in verbal form. 1 Peter 2:23. We have to back up though, because again he's got to use Jesus as the supreme example. Verse 18, yes. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the forward, the not so nice. I've been thankful to have good bosses over the years. My last two bosses have been saved people. And that just simply meant that the environment that they tried to foster was one of goodness, wholesomeness. There was no cursing. There was no foul jokes. In fact, the service master, for a while there, we would gather as we all had our jobs to go to, and we'd all gather for prayer. And Jim, my boss, would say, Wes, would you like to pray this morning? Or Mike, would you like to pray this morning? And so we'd pray, and then we'd jump into our service vans and go serve the community. And so that was really, really nice. So I've had two good bosses like that. Okay. Now my current boss, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway. All right, so be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the forward. For this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience toward God, now there's the key, underline that. If for conscience sake toward God, if you got God in the foremind, the reason, motive. You endure the grief, suffering wrongfully. Okay? For what glory is it when you be buffeted for your faults, you shall take it patiently. Okay? I had it coming, I knew it. But if when you do well and suffer for it, you take it patiently, this is acceptable with God. Seems like God is more impressed when you take something patiently and you know it wasn't you, than if you take it patiently and you know it was you.
Amen.
He's more impressed because it takes more courage, it takes more fortitude, more guts, more resolve, and more humility to take it patiently when you're not at fault. That's what's acceptable with God. And that's the righteousness that's better than the Pharisees that Jesus is talking about. Okay? For even hereunto you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow in his steps. Whether that suffering is because of our own mistakes and our own poor decisions, and that's often the case, or whether that suffering is needless, waste. I wasn't even in aisle 7, and the thing collapsed, okay? And so, he said, when it's not your fault, he said, the suffering's going to come from every direction and for every reason. Who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. No deceit, no hypocrisy. Who, when he was reviled not again. The high priest was amazed. Pilate was amazed that Jesus didn't answer for himself. Any ordinary man would have said, now wait a minute, that's a lie. I never said that, or are you taking it out of the context? He never opened his mouth. Amazing. He didn't plead for his life, beg for his life like ordinary man would do. Amazing. Even Pilate said, don't you understand? I have the power to release you. And you're not like begging me or anything? Don't you hear what they're saying? Jesus says, you have no power except my Father gives it to you. Put it right back to his Father because he was a submissive son. Amazing, amazing. So this is the kind of preparation that his disciples, he knew they would need because they were going to go out among a very hostile crowd and hostile clergy, as it were, leadership. When he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him. Underline that, that's the same thing, he said it again. But committed himself to him that judges righteously. Well, they'll get theirs. They'll get theirs. They'll absolutely get theirs. But that's not for us to. That's not for us to execute ourselves. Oh, we can want it, believe me. We're in a situation that I want certain things to happen. And I have to kind of hold myself in check, so I don't have these unholy feelings. But it's not easy. It's not easy. Because when you see what's right and what's the right thing and how it should work out, and who's clearly in the wrong, your flesh rises up and you say, this one needs to be dealt with today and taken care of. Because it's all wrong, and it's evil, and it's wicked. Okay? But I have to be careful. I have to be careful. Jesus didn't do one thing wrong. They reviled against him, and he never said anything in return. Okay? He in his own self, in his own body, bore our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, being dead to sins, having that same mindset, should live unto righteousness. There's that word righteousness again. By whose stripes you were healed. For you were as sheep going astray, but now are returned unto the shepherd and bishop of your souls. And so, if that's the case, then we need to listen to the shepherd and bishop of our souls. And start doing it the way that he would be pleased with. Okay? So, alright, well, we'll get ready to close here. We'll go down to the next couple of verses. What time is it? Oh yeah, we need to close here. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's all right. So, blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. Again, there's a payoff. There's a payoff. It's not like he's asking you to do this, and then in the end you die. and you get nothing to show for the restraining of your flesh. When it would have felt so good to cut loose and just berate people and get in their grill and just, you know what I'm saying? That would it felt so good. But I didn't. Do I get something for that? Yes, you do. You do. And tradition holds that every one of these apostles, except Judas, died for Christ. They stayed in there and died for him. They, believing this reward was for them. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. So he said, let me remind you that you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And so with those two metaphors in mind, he said basically, and of course there's 3 more chapters of this, but 3 more chapters, but basically after that he says, all right, let's go. Let's go back down the mountain. We got some work to do. Okay, let's go mix it up, and we'll just kind of learn more as we go along. Okay, but I've given you the premise. I've given you the foundation, something to think about. Now as we intermix, you're going to see what I warned you about. We're going to be sheep in the midst of wolves. So brace yourself. Okay, and I think the apostles did a pretty good job because, like I said, they went to the death. They stayed with Jesus. So I think they got it, they learned it, and they're resting now, waiting for their reward. And now it's just our turn. We're just another generation of disciples waiting our turn. So,